Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're going to show you how to install an aftermarket radio in your vehicle. Let's get started. Now before we jump into things here, first and foremost, every make and model is going to be different, and so in order for you to be most prepared for your install, you're going to have to do a little bit of research. Now there's multiple websites out there, whether it be directly with manufacturers or third-party resellers. There are ways for you to identify what parts you need for your install and how to install an aftermarket radio in the factory location. Now, generally speaking, most of these sites will have a vehicle fit guide, and that fit guide allows you to identify what parts are needed for your install. Websites like Metra Online, Pack Audio, iDataLink Maestro, Crux Interfaces, or even other third-party resellers will have that fit guide where you enter in your year, make, and model, and they'll help you identify what parts are needed for your install. Now, once I identified the parts that you need for your install and you order those parts, the next thing you need to do is you'll find yourself in your vehicle and you've got to get the factory equipment up and out of the way. Now, every single dash style is going to be different as well. There are aids out there. We on our channel have a ton of videos on how to disassemble multiple dashes for various years, makes, and models. But if you don't see one on our channel or on YouTube in general, one cool thing, Metra Online, if you use one of their dash kits, they always include instructions in their dash kit packaging that shows you the dash disassembly. So kind of a cool little tidbit there too. Alright, so we're here in this 2007 FJ Cruiser. Now in our install today, we're going to be putting a touchscreen in the factory location of this vehicle. Now before we just try to pull pieces apart or figure out how the radio comes out, from our research and from our videos, we have identified that there's a couple of pieces that need to come off first. First and foremost, these silver pieces on the side are held in with clips and a screw. You may find that in your install as well. There's clips or hidden screws or elements to your dash that you need to be conscientious of so you don't accidentally start breaking pieces. Now, with generally you find your screws removed, I like to use these vinyl panel tools, and we can link some in the description, but it gives you leverage all in the right places. They come in various styles, but the cool thing is they're made of vinyl plastic, and so you actually reduce the risk of scratching your factory pieces. So I highly suggest picking one of these sets up just so you don't accidentally damage anything or break parts. So the next thing from our research, it looks like these silver pieces are held on with clips, and there's one there. All right, next thing here, it looks like we have two Phillips screws. It looks like the last thing here, the rest of the bezel should be just held on with clips. Now you want to be careful, you don't want to scratch this, especially with this type of piece when it has a nice glossy finish. Be very careful, you don't want to damage any of these pieces. Alright, finally here it looks like we have now great access to the radio, and it appears it's held on with 10mm bolts. Let's remove those. Now before we go ahead and pull the radio on out, we probably will consider pulling this out and unplugging it, just so first and foremost we don't damage it, but also gives us a little more space to work with the radio. Now one thing to keep note, if your dash bezel of some kind has the airbag light or indicator in it, you got to be very careful. If you do end up disconnecting your harnesses, you don't turn on the key ignition. Some makes and models will actually trigger the airbag light on the dash, and you may have to go into the dealer to get that cleared. Word of warning there, be very careful. Ours happens to be that way, where we do have that located on the bezel. So while this panel is disconnected, we will not be turning on the vehicle. All right, so at this point of time, let's go ahead and pull this on out. Now your radio will have various plugs on it, or harnesses that you'll need to disconnect. Go ahead and disconnect those. Most of which will have little tabs that you press in, which releases the lock mechanism, and the plug should slide on out. Some of them are like this antenna plug will just slide on out. Okay, this is our factory radio removed. Let's now head over to the bench to show you the parts that we're going to use for our install today. All right, here we are at the bench. Now, first and foremost, the radio that we've chosen to go with in this install is this navigation double-din touchscreen by Pioneer. It's the AVIC W8500 NEX. Features onboard nav, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, both wired and wireless. Tons and tons of features. It's a nice premium radio that we have for our rig. Now, we've done our research here, and based on that research, we have found there's multiple different harnesses that'll work for our application here today. Now, based on our research, we have 3 different harness setups that we can use for our vehicle based on both the features we're looking to retain, maybe features we're looking to add, or features, frankly, we just don't care about retaining with our new radio. Now, starting on the left-hand side, this is a premium harness where not only will it retain everything in the vehicle from factory, including potentially your amplifier, but it will also add cool gadgets like tire pressure sensor information, vehicle data, and things like that on screen. So it adds a ton of cool information. If you don't want to spend the money on a premium harness like that that will fit your vehicle, there's other alternatives like kind of a middle tier with this Crux wiring harness adapter, where what this does, it retains your basic features. It's not adding any additional features, but it'll ensure like your steering wheel controls will work while installing your new aftermarket radio. And units like this come pre-programmed, and it's super nice and convenient to install. Even a step further down is just your basic wiring harness. Your vehicle may have one of these where essentially it just allows you to connect the radio to those factory plugs. You're not retaining any steering wheel controls or any other factory features. It's just your basic harness. So again, in your research, as you look to see what will fit with your vehicle, just be aware that there may be multiple harnesses that will work for your year, make, and model. You just need to decide what features you're retaining, what features you want to add, or what features you just don't care about keeping with your new radio. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is a dash kit. Obviously, this just doesn't bolt up into the dash. Aftermarket radios are universal, and so you're going to need some sort of attachment or kit of some kind to mount the radio in the dash so it can be housed in that factory location. Now, they're very similar in size here, but obviously this has different characteristics that our aftermarket radio doesn't have. So based on our research, we have found that we need a dash kit in order for this to simply bolt up in the factory location. Now, this dash kit that this unit called for is the Metro 95-8202 for double DINs. They also make dash kits for single DINs, or ones that don't have the nice screen here, and it's the older style single DIN radio. That's certainly a possibility, but since we're installing a double DIN, that's the kit we need. Now, this kit does require us to use some bits and pieces from the factory radio and transfer them over to the aftermarket. In your install, that may not be required whatsoever. So what's important is, as you do your install, look at the instructions that come with your kit. Now, I mentioned previously that most dash kits provided by Metra will have instructions that come with it, not only on how to assemble the dash kit itself, but dash assembly to remove the factory radio. So again, if you didn't have a video to go by and you only had your dash kit instructions, you would be just fine. Now, essentially in these type of instructions, it'll come with multiple different dash assemblies, especially if the dash kit being used works on multiple vehicles. So you'd find the vehicle specific to your make and model, and essentially here it walks you through literally step by step with pictured instructions on how to remove that factory radio, which is super cool. And then finally, usually towards the end of your instruction manual, it will show you your kit preparation and show you how to mount the kit based on your year, make, and model. Now, like I said, our vehicle does require us to keep the factory brackets off the radio and transfer them over to our aftermarket one, and hence why our dash kit are just essentially here to fill in the spaces. Now again, it will heavily differ based on the year, make, and model, but again, do your research and you should be just fine. Alright, now the last couple of things to note: there may be some miscellaneous harnesses or adapters needed for your install to really put the polishing touch with that new radio. Now, it could be an antenna adapter to retain AM and FM. Our vehicle doesn't require one because the factory plug plugs right into our new radio. Now, other specific harnesses that may be optional in your build or install, we like to use some flush mount adapters. Most aftermarket radios today, especially with those with the touchscreen, may have the USB on the back of the radio. So different various flush mounts where you can flush mount that USB for a nice factory finish. Some that can sit in the factory power socket area that you'd replace with the USB is another option. These come in different various configurations, some with USB and aux, some with dual USB like this one, some with even an HDMI in there. Just depends on your application. And also, if you're retaining aux or different adapters, you may need this adapter like what we're using. It's a RCA to 3.5 millimeter jack end to retain our factory aux port. So again, so many different various setups, some things to keep note just to finish off your build, your install, to make it nice and clean. You may want to consider these adapters. Okay, so it's time to start assembly here, and we're going to focus our attention on the wiring first. Now, the customer has opted in for a premium harness setup because in this FJ Cruiser, he'd like to see a lot of the engine analytics and engine data to be presented on the screen. So we're going to be going with this iDataLink Maestro setup. Now with this, the harness doesn't include the brain module. It's actually two purchases, both the wiring harness and the module that does all the fancy stuff. So we've picked this up. Now our vehicle calls for the iDataLink Maestro TO1. Now what we're going to do is pull this all apart, and next we're going to grab our wiring harness adapter that came with the radio, and we're going to start preparing that harness by matching up colors. Alright, so we got our harness box all pulled apart. It does look intimidating. There's a ton of adapters in here, but again, remember, this fits a ton of different model of Toyotas. What you'll need to do, rather than just jumping in and assuming you need everything, is, especially with a premium harness like this, you always go to their website and determine exactly what harnesses we'll need for your install. Now we know for ours, we don't have a factory camera. We have a ton of factory camera adapters, so we're gonna go ahead and remove all these. Now this harness here goes to the OBD2 port to pull in engine data. We have a couple of other adapters, but our main harness itself. Now in most your harnesses, depending on what type of harness you decide to go with, you'll have some ends like this. Now these ends, essentially here, we're going to strip all the way. And these are what are going to connect to our aftermarket radio's ends. Now you can connect those in many different various ways, and we do have a video here on the channel that walks you through that entire process of how to connect those ends. We like to solder here in the Provo Beast Garage. You can use alternatively butt connectors where you put wires in both ends and crimp, or you use crimp caps where you twist the wires together, put this over the top of those twisted pair, and crimp them down. Note, in an automotive application, don't use wire nuts. Wire nuts are not designed for an automotive environment, and these could potentially fall off and cause shorts within the vehicle, so don't use these. Okay, so what we're going to do is just print out our instructions here. They're not included in the box. Sometimes they are, depending on the harness that we're going to go with, and we'll be right back. Right, so what we've done is prepped our wiring harness. Now depending on the level of wiring harness, you may have more prep or less prep. Just depends on your year, make, and model. Because we are using a premium harness, this module doesn't come pre-programmed like some others do. So what we needed to do is we ran to a computer, went to this manufacturer's website, and flashed this module, telling this module the radio we're installing as well as the vehicle that this is being installed to. That also came with instructions that we printed out, which helps us identify how to wire everything up. We have our harness here. This end will plug into the vehicle. These ends will plug into our smart harness. And then these bare wires will wire into our aftermarket chosen radio. We're going to wire it color for color. Again, you can use crimp caps, butt connectors, but today we're going to be soldering. Alright, so we went ahead and soldered up our connections here. Before we soldered those up, we put heat shrink over our wires. So as these have now cooled, we can move them up and over those connections, and then we'll use a heat gun to shrink the tubes. Alrighty, so we finished up our wiring harnesses here. This then plugs into our car harnesses. This then plugs into our radio. We have a data one, an aux, just a couple other accessories. It will vary based on your year, make, model, and then our smart harness here. So this is basically done. Now we've tested taped our harness. We like that protection that it provides our wiring within the dash itself. Also looks professional, nice and clean. If you don't use tested tape, you can use electrical tape, but that kind of leaves a sticky mess. So at least just zip tie and clean up your wiring so nothing gets snagged back behind the radio. Okay, so at this point we can focus our attention over onto our dash kit. Alright, so with the wiring done and out of the way, now we need to focus our attention on the dash kit. So we have our dash kit pieces. Now based on the instructions that are included with the dash kit, it states that we need to transfer over the brackets from the OEM radio to our aftermarket one, and while we tighten those down, to use these side adapters to fill in the gaps between the radio and the dash bezel. Now, like I said, your installation instructions may be totally different based on the year, make, and model. So always go through the instruction manual in detail to ensure that you don't miss any steps and your install goes nice and smooth. Alright, so we got our radio all mounted in our kit per the instructions. With our wiring harness and our radio all assembled at this point of time, what we can do is head over to the car and start getting everything reinstalled. Okay, so we're back here in the car. Now what we'll need to do at this point of time is start assembling and connecting our wiring harness to both the car and the radio itself and get our radio mounted up. Now before you do so, a couple of things to note. You may want to go ahead and install a Bluetooth microphone or any other miscellaneous accessories that you're installing in your vehicle, such as a USB or GPS antenna, just kind of depending on what features you're installing based on the radio you're putting in your vehicle. Our Bluetooth mic is on the A-pillar, and essentially we've run that down the weather seal up underneath the dash, zip tying it to existing wiring up into the radio cavity. We also have a GPS antenna which we've mounted up there on the dash, which has a clear view of the sky. And we also did a USB flush mount down below. Little things like that turn your basic install into a nice professional look. So at this point of time, let's grab our wiring harness that you saw us prep on the bench. Everything will be keyed differently, so you plug your wiring harness into the vehicle. Make sure it clicks as it goes on in. Okay. So there's our basic 4 wires there. Make sure everything else is also connected. Now what we'll need to do next here is grab our radio that has the installed dash kit you saw us put on previously. Alright, so with everything connected, what you need to do is, based on your install, you may have a ton of adapters and harnesses. Make sure you tuck those out of the way just so your radio can sit flush into the dash. Alright, so before we button everything up, we want to make sure everything is working in the vehicle. We've reconnected this bezel down below because it includes the airbag light. We don't want to set that prematurely off on the dash. So we've got that all connected here, and let's do a test just to ensure all features of the vehicle are working properly before we button everything up. Okay, so it seems like everything's working great. Let's continue to reassemble the dash. Alright, that's it for this install, and hopefully as a good tutorial for you as you plan on installing an aftermarket radio in your vehicle. Now, if you have any questions on what we did here, go ahead and post a comment below. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time, and we will see you in the next video.